So, Rebekah was born on March 26 in 1988 in Midland, Michigan. She had graduated in 2007 and was a beautiful young lady. Blonde hair, religious upbringing, seemingly very sweet. She had went on to study cosmology at her local college and had lived in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, at a trailer park with her then 3 that survived